everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. This month in the paper greenhouse, we're going to be discussing pastels and other dry coloring mediums that you can use to color your paper flowers. So first up, we're going to be discussing Pan Pastels, which is a favorite in the community, just because it is probably one of the easier mediums to work with as far as pastels go, because they are in these aptly named pans. So they're just easy to apply with a brush or even with a makeup sponge to your paper and other mediums as well. So we're going to kind of go through that, kind of discuss what works, what doesn't work, and we'll go from there. So the first thing I want to talk about is a good starter set. We get this question a lot of what color should I buy? I don't know if I need to use all of these colors because there's so many. So I do want to kind of go over just this basic set, which is actually the Leah Griffith Pan Pastel set. It's a great starter. You will use most of these colors a lot in your projects. You can see from what I've got here, I use the magenta tint, the magenta a lot. The pearlescent red I use quite a bit, as well as the bright yellow green. These warmer tones I don't use quite as much. I don't really use the orange all that much, but as far as getting a full set, this is probably the one you want to start with. Additional colors over and above these 7 that I would recommend just to have would be the titanium white, just so you can add little highlights or little specks of white on your petals. The Dairylite yellow, which is really great for your flower centers and stamen. And then the red iron oxide is really great to use for rose leaves. So yeah, those are the ones I would recommend just as your basic starter set. I have quite a few other ones that we can delve into as far as greens and other pinks that you could use too. But for now, this is what I would recommend as a basic set. And then maybe also add to that the bright yellow-green shade for leaves and such. So it's just a darker version of this color here. So yeah, those would be my main recommendations for colors. So yeah, we'll move on from that. I will get this cleared off here, and then we'll talk about application. Actually, really quick before we jump to that, I do want to show, so this red iron oxide is all cracked looking. That's because when I received it, it was broken. I ordered it from Blick. Rather than sending it back and have them sending me a new one, I just fixed it. So you can actually use the same technique that they use for broken makeup. So you just want to take it, break it up even more, mix it up with some rubbing alcohol and just let it dry. It'll solidify back. You may get some cracks, but that's okay. It's still usable. So little trick there in case you end up with a broken pan pastel or you end up breaking it yourself. So this is how you fix it. All right. So I will move these out of the way. So there are a couple of ways that you can apply your pan pastels. And one way, for some white doublet here, one way is to use a sponge. So you can use just a basic makeup sponge. You can get these super cheap at the dollar store. When you buy the Leah Griffith set, it'll also come with sponges that you can use. I'm not a huge fan of this method because what'll happen is if you use the sponge, you end up using way more product than you need and you don't get it blended into the grain lines as well. You can use it, it's an okay application, And I know I'm shaking my camera here, so we'll wait for that to steady back out. But you can even see here that you can still see a lot of the white kind of peeking through that color. So while you can use these, they're not my favorite. So what I would recommend instead is actually using the oval head makeup brush. This is actually really great. You can get these at the dollar store as well. We also have a set of makeup brushes that are listed in the tools list in the files tab on the group page. So if you wanted to check those out, this is what these look like. So this is about the same size as far as bristles go, but there is a full makeup set. So you have some brushes like these and like this, and then even like this really big guy over here. So I actually do use this one from time to time if I'm coloring a big like piece of paper. Usually if I'm doing like greens for leaves, this is the one I'll use, so I can color a whole sheet without having to do a whole lot of work. So with these oval brushes, you don't use as much product as you would with the sponge. So that's one of the reasons I do really like this method. So I'm just gonna go back into my magenta here and pick up some color, and then I'm gonna go right next to where I just colored with the sponge so you can see the difference. And I'm gonna start working that into the paper. Looks like I had a little bit of yellow on that from before, so color is gonna look a little bit different, but you can still see the application difference. So this you can actually really like take just a tiny bit of pressure and really work it into the paper, and you get more coverage that way. So you don't really see a whole lot of white peeking through here in the grain where you do here. So just something to keep in mind when you're using these. So as you saw here, I used the same color magenta, but this brush wasn't clean. So make sure you clean your brushes if you change colors. So just make sure you wipe that off either with even just a dry paper towel. You should be able to get most of the color out just by rubbing it really fast. And that should get most of the color out, if not all. You do want to wash these from time to time, just like your makeup brushes. Just make sure you give them ample time to dry before you go back into your Pan Pastel. So there's that. The other thing you can also do with these brushes is blend the colors, right? So I'm going to take a little bit of this magenta again, and I'm going to go over here and see, just by doing that cleaning over on this side, I'm getting a more clear magenta color. So we've got a little bit of magenta here, and then say I want to go to that lighter magenta color. So I'm gonna pick up some of that, and I'm just gonna kind of go back over what I just did with the darker magenta and just blend that together. And you get a really nice gradient that way. So you can see that. So that's a couple of ways you can do that. Sometimes you just want to do like a little bit of a color on like the edge of a petal. So you can just kind of go against the edge of your petal just to add that little hint of color, or you can color the whole thing. So it's really just kind of your preference of what you want the colors to do and how you want to make that work. So one more color application you can use is actually with Model Magic. So this right here is actually some white Model Magic that I colored with this bright yellow green Pan Pastel. So to do that, you can just take it, flatten it out a little bit, kind of rub it up into your Pan Pastel to get some color, and then mix it in. Sometimes, depending on how old your Model Magic is, you may have to add just a little bit of water in case it is dried out. But you can just kind of knead that and mix that color in. If it doesn't end up being bright enough, you can always go back once you create the shapes that you want to create. You can go back and color it again before it completely dries, and then you'll get the right color. So this is a good way to get a base color for your model magic. So like if you're using this to make berries or buds, this is a good way to get that colored without having to buy other colors. So you can just buy like a big bucket of the white model magic and then color it however you want. So just wanted to mention that really quick. So one other thing I wanted to mention about the Pan Pastels is a feature that I really do like is the fact that these canisters or these pans will actually screw together. So you can have like a big old stack of them on your desk and they don't take up a whole lot of room, and you have all your colors at your fingertips. I actually do have 2 different stacks. So I have all of my like warm colors in this stack with my white, and then I have my greens all together so I can find everything easily. So just something else to mention with Pan Pastels as an advantage. I really do think that that medium is worth the money. They do last a long time because there's a lot in there and it is so highly pigmented, you don't need a whole lot to work with. So other coloring mediums that you can use that are pastel or pastel related. So like for instance, if you live in a country that you can't get Pan Pastels easily, or it's just too expensive for you, I'm gonna go over a couple of alternatives, and then Gerry will come in later this month to kind of delve into those in more detail. So the first one I want to talk about is the soft pastel sticks. So you can just go to your local art store or craft store and pick up just a standard pastel set. Usually is like your rainbow of colors plus some browns, black and white. This is the super like basic set. This one is actually a Prismacolor set. And the way that you would use these is kind of the same. You would basically take your pastel or pastels and use something like a craft knife or something metal to kind of scrape off some of the powder. So I'm actually just going to use these tweezers real quick because that's what I have on hand. So I'm just going to scrape that off to get like a little pile of powder like that, and then you can use a brush to apply that to your paper. So like for instance with this one, say I want to add some red to this, I can just pick that up and add that to it. So depending on the brand of pastels you buy, the pigmentation levels may be different. So like for this one, it's a little harder to see that red. Like it still shows up, but it's not as strong as I would necessarily like for it to be. The other way you could do it is you can apply some of the color directly to the paper and then blend it out with the brush. Again, it's not my favorite application, but it is a way to get that color a little deeper. So you can get a little bit of a brighter color that way. So that's an option. Other alternative would be using either old makeup or cheap makeup if you don't want to use your old makeup for this. So I'm going to move this. I actually found this eyeshadow set on Amazon. It does not look like it's available anymore, but I do want to show this one, and it is just, again, kind of a full spectrum, like rainbow of colors with some neutrals as well that you can use. And I would use the same technique as well as using the brush to apply the color. You can use a sponge as well. It just kind of depends on what your needs are for that application. But like I said, Gerry will be coming in later this month to go over other application ideas for these other two mediums. So I will pass that off to him, and thank you again so much for joining me, and we will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.